I never imagined that 5 years of unconditional love could be erased in a single moment of greed. My name is Margaret Holloway, and at 68 years old, I thought I understood sacrifice. I'd raised my son Daniel alone after my husband Richard died, teaching him about loyalty, kindness, and showing up when people need you most. I believed those lessons had taken root. I was devastatingly wrong. When Daniel married Veronica 5 years ago, I saw the warning signs. The way she calculated the value of everything I owned with those sharp green eyes. How she looked at my modest Asheville home with barely concealed disdain. But Daniel loved her desperately. And they had dreams. Big, glittering dreams of entrepreneurial success that collapsed one after another under poor planning and Veronica's unwillingness to do unglamorous work. That's when they came to me. Not with humility, but with expectation. As if my life savings and my home were resources that belonged to them by birthright. "Mom, we're about to lose everything," Daniel said, his eyes avoiding mine. "The kids need stability, just for a little while." So I sold my house on Montfort Avenue, the house where I'd planted azaleas that bloomed every spring, where Richard and I had slow danced in the kitchen on our 20th anniversary. I gave them $230,000 and moved into their garage apartment, a converted storage space with a twin bed, a hot plate, and a window facing an alley where raccoons fought over garbage every Thursday night. Temporary, they'd said. 5 years ago. I became invisible. I cooked their meals, watched 7-year-old Emma and 4-year-old Lucas while they chased doomed business ventures, cleaned their house until my knees ached, and pretended not to hear Veronica's cruel jokes about the live-in help. Daniel changed too. The boy who used to bring me wildflowers became a man who couldn't meet my eyes, who flinched when Veronica snapped her fingers, who let his mother become a ghost in her own family. I absorbed it all because I loved them. Because you don't give up on family. Because I believed they'd eventually remember who I was. Then came that humid July evening when everything shattered. I was in my garage room, mending Lucas's shirt by lamplight, planning my escape. I'd finally reached my breaking point. My car was packed. At dawn, I'd leave for my friend Sylvia's house and reclaim what was left of my life. But at 5:45 a.m., my door burst open. Daniel and Veronica stood there, faces flushed and gleaming with something feral, something dangerous. Veronica held a lottery ticket above her head like a trophy. $5 million, she shrieked. "We won $5 million. Daniel's voice came out strangled. "We're free, Mom. We're finally free." Then Veronica's face twisted with contempt so pure it was almost beautiful in its cruelty. "We don't need you anymore," she said, each word landing like a slap. "You can go live in a shelter for all we care. We're done playing charity case with you." I sat there, needle still in my hand, watching my son nod along to his wife's venom. 5 years of sacrifice, 5 years of love, erased. They saw my packed car and assumed I was leaving because I'd somehow known about their windfall. As if I was opportunistic enough to abandon them in poverty, but shameless enough to cling to them in wealth. But I wasn't looking at their faces. I was looking at that lottery ticket, at the way Veronica's thumb partially obscured the date, at the faded edges suggesting it had been sitting in a wallet for a while. So I asked the only question that mattered. "Have you checked if that draw isn't from last month?" The color drained from their faces like water from a tub. Veronica's hand trembled as she looked down at the ticket. Daniel's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The drawing was July 7th. Today was August 3rd. 27 days had passed. They still had 3 days to claim it, but they'd already revealed themselves completely. They'd told me to live in a shelter. They'd shown me exactly how little I meant to them, and they'd done it all before even verifying if the ticket was real. The mask was off. There was no taking it back. What happened next would force Daniel to confront who he'd become, test whether genuine remorse could rebuild what cruelty had shattered, and make me decide if some betrayals cut too deep to heal, or if love means offering grace even when every instinct screams for justice. They claimed the ticket. It was real. $3.2 million after taxes. And I was gone. This is the story of what happened when a lottery ticket worth millions became worthless compared to the price of dignity. When a single question exposed 5 years of exploitation. When a mother had to choose between saving her family and saving herself. When I finally learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. The garage apartment smelled like mildew and regret. Though I'd scrubbed every surface with bleach so many times, the fumes had become a kind of perfume I no longer noticed. 5 years, and I still couldn't get rid of that smell. The way dampness crept through the concrete walls every time it rained. The way my clothes absorbed it until even my skin seemed to carry that scent of something slowly rotting. I'd learned to ignore it, the same way I'd learned to ignore a lot of things. It was Tuesday morning, early July, and the North Carolina heat had already turned the small space into an oven by 6 a.m. I pushed myself out of the twin bed, the metal frame squeaking in protest the way my knees did, and began my routine. Coffee first, made on the hot plate because going into the main house before 7 meant risking Veronica's wrath. She needed her sacred morning time, which as far as I could tell consisted of scrolling through Instagram and muttering about people who had it all handed to them. I stood by the single window that faced the alley and sipped my coffee black, watching the morning light turn the brick walls of the neighboring houses from gray to amber. Asheville used to feel like home. Every street corner held a memory. Every season brought familiar beauty. Now it felt like a city I was visiting, a place where I existed but didn't quite belong. My real home, the house on Montford Avenue with its wraparound porch and garden full of azaleas, belonged to a family named Chen now. I'd driven past it once about 6 months after selling it and saw them installing solar panels on the roof. Richard would have loved that. He'd always talked about solar panels back when they were too expensive for a second-grade teacher and an insurance adjuster to afford. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Mom, can you make pancakes? Emma asking for them. V has early meeting. No, good morning. No, please." Just the assumption that I'd be there, that I'd always be there, that my purpose was to fill in the gaps of their chaotic lives. I texted back a simple thumbs up and pulled on my clothes, the same rotation of 3 outfits I'd been wearing for the past year. Everything else I'd donated or sold when I'd moved into this 150-square-foot box that Daniel and Veronica called the guest quarters, as if that made it sound better than what it was, a storage space with plumbing. I walked across the driveway to the main house using the key they'd given me that only opened the back door, never the front. Veronica had made that rule clear early on. Family uses the back entrance. Front door is for guests and clients. I'd stopped pointing out that I was family. It took too much energy to fight battles I couldn't win. Inside, the kitchen was a disaster, evidence of last night's dinner, which apparently they'd ordered from some expensive farm-to-table place downtown. Compostable containers littered the counter. Wine glasses with dried red residue clustered by the sink, crumbs everywhere. I started cleaning automatically, my hands moving through the familiar motions while my mind drifted. This was the rhythm of my life now. Clean, cook, care for the children, stay quiet, take up as little space as possible. Emma appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, the ones with little astronauts floating across pink fabric. She was 7 years old, with Daniel's dark curly hair and my late husband's gentle brown eyes. She was the reason I stayed, if I was being honest with myself. Emma and Lucas. They needed someone who saw them, who listened when they talked about their day, who remembered that Emma hated mushrooms and Lucas was afraid of the dark. "Hi, Grandma," she said, her voice still heavy with sleep. She climbed onto one of the kitchen stools and rested her chin on her hands. "Are you making pancakes?" "I am, sweetheart. Blueberry or chocolate chip? Can I have both?" I smiled, the first real smile of the day. "I think we can manage that." While I mixed the batter, Emma told me about a dream she'd had where she could fly, but only when she was wearing her red sneakers. I listened, asked questions, let her words wash over me like a balm against the loneliness that had become my constant companion. This was what I'd given up everything for, I told myself. Not Daniel, who barely spoke to me anymore. Not Veronica, whose contempt had grown so thick you could practically see it hanging in the air. But these kids. These beautiful, innocent kids who didn't ask to be born into this dysfunction. Lucas wandered in around 7, dragging his blanket behind him. He was 4, small for his age, with Veronica's sharp features softened by childhood. He climbed into my lap without a word, and I held him while I flipped pancakes one-handed, breathing in the little boy smell of him, apple shampoo and something indefinably sweet. "Where's Mommy?" he asked. "She has an early meeting, baby. You'll see her tonight." "She's always at meetings," Emma said, not quite complaining but not quite accepting either. "Last week she missed my school thing." The school thing had been Emma's presentation on the solar system. I'd been the only family member there, sitting in a tiny chair meant for 7-year-olds, clapping enthusiastically when Emma explained the difference between asteroids and comets. Daniel had promised to come. Veronica hadn't even pretended she would. "She's working very hard," I said, which was both true and a lie. Veronica was always busy, always rushing to meetings or networking events or crucial lunch appointments, but as far as I could tell, nothing ever came of it. The marketing agency she and Daniel had tried to launch 2 years ago had exactly 0 clients. But she maintained the appearance of success with an almost religious devotion: expensive coffee, designer notebook, constant phone calls where she spoke in aggressive corporate jargon about synergy and disrupting the space. Daniel emerged around 7:30, looking rumpled and tired. He'd gained weight over the past 5 years, his face rounder and softer, but his eyes had hardened. He kissed the kids absently, poured himself coffee, and scrolled through his phone while eating the pancakes I'd plated for him. He didn't thank me. He didn't even look at me directly. "Daniel," I said carefully, "I wanted to talk to you about the electric bill." The notice said, "Not now, Mom." His voice was flat, irritated. "I've got back-to-back calls this morning." Back-to-back calls meant he'd be in his home office, the spare bedroom they'd converted, playing video games with the door locked. I knew this because I'd walked past enough times to hear the shooting sounds, the explosions, his voice shouting into his headset at strangers on the internet. But I couldn't say that. I couldn't say anything that might disturb the fragile fiction we all maintained. Veronica appeared at 7:45 in full armor. Tailored pantsuit, hair blown out perfectly, makeup that probably took 45 minutes to apply. She looked like she was about to close a Fortune 500 deal, not attend whatever meeting she'd invented to avoid breakfast with her children. She surveyed the kitchen with the expression of a general inspecting troops, her gaze landing on me with particular coldness. "Margaret, the bathroom in the hall is disgusting. I need you to deep clean it today. And the children need new summer clothes. I'll text you a list. There's a consignment shop on Haywood Street. Budget is $70 for everything. $70 for 2 growing children's summer wardrobes." Meanwhile, her purse, sitting on the counter, probably cost $800. I nodded because what else could I do? "Emma, Lucas, Mommy has to go," Veronica said, her voice shifting into the sugary tone she used when other people might be watching. She kissed the air near their faces, careful not to disturb her lipstick. "Be good for Grandma." And then she was gone, leaving behind a cloud of expensive perfume and unmet needs. Daniel left 10 minutes later, mumbling something about meeting a potential investor. I knew there was no investor. There was never an investor. There was just the desperate need to be anywhere but in this house, facing the reality of what their lives had become. By 8:15, it was just me and the kids. I got them dressed, packed Emma's day camp bag, prepared Lucas's snacks for the playdate he had at noon with a neighbor's child. The house hummed with the quiet industry of my labor, laundry sorting itself by color in my mind, grocery lists forming, schedules aligning. I'd always been good at this, at holding the invisible architecture of family life together. When Richard was alive and Daniel was young, I juggled teaching full-time and running our household with an efficiency that felt almost effortless. But that was different. That was my home, my family, my choice. This was something else entirely. After I dropped Emma at day camp, held at the community center 3 miles away, and Lucas at his playdate, I returned to an empty house. These were the hardest hours, when the silence pressed down, and I had nothing to distract me from the question I'd been avoiding for 5 years. How did I end up here? I started in the hallway bathroom, the one Veronica had deemed disgusting. It was spotless, of course, because I'd cleaned it 2 days ago. But I cleaned it again, scrubbing grout with an old toothbrush, polishing chrome until it gleamed, erasing any evidence that human beings used this space. While I worked, my mind wandered back to the beginning, to the moment when everything changed. It had been August 5 years ago. Daniel and Veronica had been married for 3 months, living in a cramped apartment downtown, drowning in debt from the wedding Veronica had insisted on. $30,000 they didn't have for a single day of performance. Daniel had called me late one night, his voice breaking. "Mom, we're going to lose everything. The food truck business failed, we're behind on rent, and Veronica is pregnant. I don't know what to do." The food truck business. God, I'd tried to warn him. He and Veronica had sunk $25,000, money borrowed from credit cards and a predatory loan shark who charged 18% interest, into a gourmet grilled cheese truck. They'd lasted 3 months before realizing that Asheville's food truck scene was saturated, that their prices were too high, that neither of them actually enjoyed cooking for 10 hours straight in a hot truck. They'd sold it for $7,000, taking a crushing loss. "Come home," I'd told Daniel that night. Move in with me. We'll figure it out. We need more than that, Mom. His voice had gone quiet, ashamed. We need you to help us get on our feet. Really help us. I should have asked what really help meant. I should have set boundaries, established limits, protected myself. But all I heard was my son's desperation, and all I felt was the primal pull to fix it, to save him the way I'd saved him from scraped knees and middle school bullies and heartbreak. So I sold my house. I gave them most of the money, $230,000 from the sale, after closing costs. They put it toward buying this house in West Asheville, a foreclosure they got for a steal because it needed extensive work. I moved into the garage apartment temporarily while they got their feet under them. The rest of my money, about $50,000, I put into a savings account for emergencies, which they steadily depleted over the next 3 years for their various failed ventures. The marketing agency, the Etsy furniture store, the life coaching certification program Veronica never completed, the cryptocurrency investment that lost $12,000 in 2 weeks. Now that account had $843 in it. My Social Security covered my basic expenses barely. I had no home to return to, no safety net, no exit strategy. I was trapped, and I'd built the trap myself with love and good intentions. By noon, I'd cleaned 3 bathrooms, done 4 loads of laundry, and reorganized the playroom that Emma and Lucas had destroyed over the weekend. My back ached, my knees throbbed, and I was hungry because I'd forgotten to eat breakfast. I made myself a sandwich from the heel of the bread loaf. Veronica would complain if I used the good slices, and ate it standing at the kitchen counter, looking out the window at the small backyard where I'd planted a garden last spring. The garden had been my one victory, my small rebellion. I'd asked permission, and Daniel had shrugged and said, sure, whatever. I'd turned a patch of weedy grass into rows of tomatoes, zucchini, herbs, and sunflowers that now towered over everything else, their faces tracking the sun. Working in that garden was the only time I felt like myself, like Margaret Holloway instead of Mom, or the help, or whatever invisible role I'd been reduced to. I was washing my plate when my phone rang. Sylvia, my oldest friend, the one person who knew the truth about my life and wouldn't let me pretend everything was fine. Tell me you're getting out of that house today, she said by way of greeting. Sylvia had never mastered small talk, which was one of the things I loved about her. Tell me you're meeting me for coffee and we're going to have an actual conversation. I can't. I have to pick up Lucas at 2, then Emma at 3:30, then Margaret Ann Holloway. I swear to God, if you give me that martyr routine one more time, I'm going to come over there and physically remove you from that house. I smiled despite myself. It's not a routine. They need me. Those kids need you. Daniel and Veronica need a wake-up call and a reality check. There's a difference. Sylvia, 1 hour, meet me at High Five Coffee at 2:30. You can pick up Emma by 3:30. 1 hour to remember you're a human being and not a household appliance. I started to refuse, to list all the reasons why I couldn't, but something in me cracked. Maybe it was the spotless bathroom I'd just cleaned that would be dirty again by tomorrow. Maybe it was the way Daniel hadn't looked at me this morning. Maybe it was just exhaustion, bone deep and suffocating. Okay, I heard myself say. 2:30. Thank God. I thought I'd lost you completely. After I picked up Lucas from his playdate, where the mother Jennifer had looked at me with pity that made my skin crawl, I dropped him back at the house with Daniel, who'd emerged from his office long enough to grunt acknowledgement. Then I drove to downtown Asheville, to the coffee shop where Sylvia was already waiting at our usual corner table. She hugged me hard when I arrived. The kind of hug that said she knew, she saw, she understood. Sylvia was 71, a retired nurse with steel gray hair she wore in a practical bob, and a wardrobe consisting entirely of variations on the same theme. Jeans, comfortable shoes, loose cotton tops. She'd been widowed 15 years ago and had built a life of fierce independence, volunteering at the free clinic, traveling solo to places like Morocco and Peru, learning to play the banjo just because she felt like it. She was everything I wasn't, and I loved her for it. You look exhausted, she said bluntly, studying my face. And you've lost weight you don't have to lose. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're disappearing, Margaret. Right in front of my eyes, you're disappearing, and I don't know how to stop it. I sipped my coffee, a luxury, spending $4 on coffee when I could make it at home, and tried to find words for something I barely understood myself. I keep thinking it'll get better, that they'll get back on their feet, and things will shift, and Daniel will remember who I am. And while you wait for that fantasy, what? You grind yourself down to nothing? They're my family. Family doesn't treat you like indentured labor. Sylvia's voice was sharp, cutting. Family doesn't take everything and give nothing back. That's not family, Margaret. That's exploitation. The word hung between us, ugly and true. I wanted to argue, to defend Daniel, to explain that he was just stressed and that Veronica came from a difficult background and that it wasn't as simple as Sylvia made it sound. But I couldn't, because somewhere deep down, I knew she was right. What am I supposed to do? I asked and hated how small my voice sounded. Where am I supposed to go? I'm 68 years old with $800 to my name. I gave them everything, Sylvia. Everything. I know, honey. I know. She reached across the table and took my hand. But you're still here. You're still alive. And you're stronger than you think. We talked for 45 minutes. The conversation ranging from the mundane to the profound. She told me about her latest volunteer shift at the clinic, about the banjo class she'd joined where she was the oldest student by 30 years. I told her about Emma's solar system presentation, about the garden, about the small moments that kept me going. Neither of us mentioned Daniel or Veronica again, but their presence haunted the conversation like ghosts we'd agreed not to name. When I finally left to pick up Emma, I felt slightly more human, slightly less invisible. The feeling lasted exactly as long as it took to return to the house. The next 2 weeks passed in the same rhythm. Wake early, make breakfast, care for the children, clean, cook, disappear. Daniel and Veronica moved through the house like people in separate orbits, rarely speaking to each other except in clipped, irritated exchanges. The tension between them had been building for months, a pressure system about to break. Veronica blamed Daniel for their financial failures. Daniel resented Veronica's spending and her inability to actually generate income from her business. Both of them seemed to have forgotten I existed except when they needed something. Emma asked me one night while I was tucking her into bed, "Grandma, are you happy?" The question startled me. Children have that way of seeing straight through pretense to the truth underneath. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" "You seem sad sometimes, like when you think no one is watching." I smoothed her hair back from her forehead, my heart breaking. "I'm happy when I'm with you and Lucas. You two are my sunshine. But what about the rest of the time?" I didn't have an answer that wouldn't burden her with adult pain, so I kissed her forehead and changed the subject. But her question haunted me, echoing through the sleepless hours I spent in my garage apartment, staring at the ceiling and wondering how much longer I could sustain this existence. The first week of July became the second. The heat intensified, turning Asheville into a steam bath. The air conditioning in the main house ran constantly, but my garage apartment had only a small window unit that wheezed and struggled. I spent nights lying on top of the sheets, sweating, counting the cracks in the ceiling like sheep. I should have known something was building toward a breaking point. I should have seen the signs. Veronica's increasing hostility, the way she'd started treating me not just with indifference but with active contempt, making cutting remarks about people who don't contribute and dead weight. Daniel had withdrawn even further, spending entire days locked in his office, emerging only for meals I'd prepared and leaving the dishes without a word of thanks. But I didn't see it coming. Or maybe I didn't want to see it, because seeing it would have required action I wasn't ready to take. It was a Thursday evening, July 22nd, when everything crystallized in a way I couldn't ignore. I'd made dinner, chicken parmesan, garlic bread, salad, and set the table as I always did. Daniel, Veronica, and the kids sat down. I stood in the kitchen waiting to see if they'd invite me to join them. They didn't. They never did anymore. I ate my portion standing at the counter, listening to their conversation drift from the dining room. Emma was talking about swimming lessons. Lucas was complaining about a boy who'd pushed him at the park. Normal family dinner conversation. Except I wasn't part of the family. Not really. I was adjacent to it, serving it, maintaining it, but not belonging to it. After dinner, after I'd cleaned up and gotten the kids ready for bed, I returned to my garage apartment and allowed myself something I rarely permitted. I cried. Not the quiet, contained tears I'd shed occasionally over the past 5 years, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place of profound grief. I grieved for the life I'd given up, for the house I'd loved, for the relationship with my son that had curdled into this cold transaction. I grieved for myself, for the woman I'd been, and the woman I'd become. When the tears finally stopped, I felt hollow but strangely clear. Something had to change. I couldn't continue like this indefinitely. I didn't know what change looked like or how to create it, but I knew I'd reached a limit I hadn't known existed. I thought about calling Sylvia, but it was past 10 o'clock. I thought about confronting Daniel, demanding respect, drawing boundaries, but I was too tired, and the prospect of conflict made my whole body tense with anxiety. Instead, I opened my laptop, the old one I'd bought 7 years ago that still limped along, and started researching. Senior housing, low-income apartments, social services, anything that might offer an exit path, a plan B, a life raft. The numbers were discouraging. Wait lists for affordable housing stretched months or years. Rent for even the cheapest studio apartment in Asheville started at $900 a month, more than my entire Social Security check. I was trapped, not just emotionally or psychologically, but practically, financially, completely. I closed the laptop and lay in the darkness, listening to the sound of raccoons fighting over trash in the alley, and wondered if this was it, if this was how the rest of my life would look. Invisible labor in a converted garage, tolerated but not valued, surviving but not living. I didn't know that in exactly 9 days everything would change. I didn't know that Veronica and Daniel were about to reveal themselves so completely that there would be no going back, no pretending, no more illusions to maintain. I didn't know that I would find a strength I'd forgotten I possessed. But on that Thursday night, lying in the darkness, I suspected something was coming. I could feel it the way you feel a storm building on the horizon, a change in pressure, a shift in the air, a sense of inevitability. I just didn't know it would arrive with a lottery ticket and words so cruel they would finally, irrevocably, break the spell I'd been under. 9 days. That's all I had left of this life before it shattered completely and forced me to decide who I was going to be in the wreckage. The morning of Friday, July 23rd, began the same way every morning began, with me pretending I'd slept when I hadn't, forcing myself upright before sunrise, moving through rituals that had become as automatic as breathing. But something felt different that morning. Maybe it was the dream I'd had just before waking, where Richard stood in our old kitchen on Montford Avenue and told me, "Margaret, you've got to stop waiting for permission to save yourself." Or maybe it was just the accumulated weight of 5 years finally reaching critical mass. I made coffee in my garage apartment and stood at the window watching the dawn break over Asheville, painting the sky in shades of peach and gold. The city was beautiful in early morning light. Always had been. Even now, even trapped in this half-life, I could appreciate that beauty. It was one of the things they hadn't taken from me yet. My phone buzzed. "Daniel, Mom V's car won't start. Can you drive Emma to camp and take Lucas to his doctor appointment? Also, we need groceries. Thanks." No question mark. Not can you, but you will. The presumption embedded in every request, the way my time and energy were treated as infinite resources that belonged to them by default. I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling something harden in my chest. Then I typed back a simple, "Okay," because what else was there to say? The doctor's appointment was for Lucas's 4-year checkup. I'd scheduled it weeks ago when Veronica had handed me a stack of the children's medical paperwork and said, "You handle this. I don't have the bandwidth." Bandwidth. As if parenting was a technical limitation rather than a choice, a priority, a sacred responsibility. Dr. Patel's office was across town, a 40-minute drive through Asheville's increasingly congested streets. Lucas sat in his car seat humming to himself, occasionally asking me questions about whether clouds were made of cotton candy or if fish ever got lonely. I answered patiently, grateful for his innocent chatter, the way it filled the silence with something pure and uncomplicated. In the waiting room, I filled out forms while Lucas played with the battered toys in the corner. A young mother sat across from us, maybe 30, with a baby on her hip and a toddler clinging to her leg. She looked exhausted in that particular way young mothers do, the bone-deep fatigue that comes from sleepless nights and endless demands. But she also looked purposeful, like she knew what she was doing mattered, like she existed at the center of her own life, rather than on the margins of someone else's. I wondered if I'd looked like that when Daniel was young. Probably. I'd been tired, God knows, but I'd also been alive in a way I couldn't quite remember anymore. Every milestone had felt momentous. Daniel's first word, his first day of kindergarten, the Christmas pageant where he'd played a shepherd and forgotten all his lines but smiled so broadly, the audience had laughed with delight. Those moments had belonged to me, to Richard, to our small family constellation. They'd been ours. Now I watched other people's children hit milestones, and the joy was real but borrowed, secondhand. Emma and Lucas's mother should have been sitting here, filling out forms, answering the doctor's questions. Instead, it was me. Grandmother pressed into service as substitute parent because the actual parents couldn't be bothered. Lucas Holloway, the nurse called. Dr. Patel was a kind woman in her 50s with gentle hands and a manner that immediately put children at ease. She examined Lucas thoroughly, asked me detailed questions about his eating habits, his sleep, his developmental progress. I answered everything, noting with a strange detachment that I knew more about Lucas's daily life than either of his parents did. "He's developing beautifully," Dr. Patel said, making notes on her tablet. "You're doing a wonderful job with him, Mrs. Holloway." I should have corrected her. I wasn't Mrs. Holloway anymore. Hadn't been since Richard died, had gone back to using my maiden name after a year of widowhood, but I didn't bother. Let her think whatever she wanted. What did it matter? "I do have one concern," she continued, her voice careful. "His records show his parents haven't attended an appointment in over 2 years. Is everything all right at home? I'm asking because continuity of care is important, and parents really should be present for these visits when possible." The question hung in the air like an accusation, though I knew she didn't mean it that way. "Everything all right at home?" How did you answer that? How did you explain that your son had abdicated his responsibilities, that your daughter-in-law treated motherhood like an inconvenient hobby, that you'd become the primary caregiver by default because no one else would step up? "They're very busy," I said, and hated myself for making excuses. "I help out where I can." Dr. Aoun. Patel looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, compassion mixed with something else, maybe concern or understanding or pity. "That's very generous of you. Just make sure you're taking care of yourself too, okay? Grandparents who take on full-time caregiving roles are at higher risk for burnout and health problems." I nodded, thanked her, gathered Lucas and his stickers and his lollipop, and left before the tears could start. In the parking lot, I sat in the car and gripped the steering wheel and breathed deeply until the feeling passed. Lucas watched me from the back seat, his dark eyes solemn. "Grandma, are you sad?" he asked. "No, baby. Just thinking. What about? How much I've given up. How invisible I've become. How I don't recognize my own life anymore. About what we should have for lunch." We stopped at a deli on the way home, and I bought Lucas a grilled cheese sandwich and myself a cup of soup I didn't really want, but forced myself to eat because skipping meals had become a bad habit. While we ate, my phone rang. Veronica. "Margaret, where are you? I needed you here an hour ago. The plumber is supposed to come and someone has to be here to let him in." "I'm at Lucas's doctor appointment, the one you asked me to handle." A pause, annoyed and impatient. "Well, how much longer are you going to be? The plumber charges $150 if we miss the appointment window." "We're finishing lunch. I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Lunch? You stopped for lunch? Jesus, Margaret. We're drowning here and you're treating this like a vacation day." The unfairness of it hit me like a physical blow. I'd been up since 5:30. I'd driven across town. I'd handled her child's medical appointment because she couldn't be bothered. And now I was being chastised for feeding that same child lunch. "I'll be there as soon as I can," I said, keeping my voice level, and hung up before she could respond. Lucas looked at me with his too perceptive eyes. "Mommy sounds mad." "She's just stressed, honey. She's always stressed." Out of the mouths of babes. I couldn't argue with him because he was right. Veronica existed in a perpetual state of manufactured crisis. Everything was urgent. Everything was critical. And somehow none of it ever resulted in actual productivity or progress. It was performative stress, stress as identity, stress as excuse for cruelty. When we got home, the plumber's van was already in the driveway. Veronica stood on the front porch, arms crossed, radiating fury. She'd changed clothes since this morning, now wearing expensive athleisure that she'd never actually exercise in, her hair pulled back in a messy bun that had probably taken 15 minutes to achieve the perfect calculated casualness. "You're late," she snapped as I got out of the car. "He's been waiting." I said 20 minutes, it's been 18. "Don't get smart with me, Margaret. I'm not in the mood." I helped Lucas out of his car seat and walked past her into the house, not trusting myself to speak. The plumber, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a toolbox, looked uncomfortable, clearly having witnessed Veronica's performance. "Kitchen sink," Veronica told him shortly. "It's been backing up for weeks because no one in this house is competent enough to maintain basic infrastructure." The barb was aimed at Daniel, who was nowhere to be seen, but it landed on me anyway. Everything did. I took Lucas to the playroom and tried to distract him with blocks while the plumber worked and Veronica hovered, criticizing his technique and questioning his rates. An hour later, after the plumber had left, with a $260 charge that Veronica had insisted I put on my credit card because we'll pay you back next week, I promise. I started on the grocery shopping. Veronica had texted me a list that required stops at 3 different stores because apparently Whole Foods had the only acceptable organic chicken. Trader Joe's had the specific brand of almond butter she liked, and the farmer's market had the heirloom tomatoes that were essential for the recipe she was planning to make but never actually would. I spent 3 hours navigating Asheville's afternoon traffic, fighting for parking spaces, hauling bags in and out of the car. My back ached. My feet throbbed. I was 68 years old, and I was doing the work of a personal assistant, a nanny, a housekeeper, and a chauffeur, all unpaid, all unappreciated. By the time I picked up Emma from camp, I was running on fumes. Emma bounced into the car with her usual energy, talking a mile a minute about the craft project they'd done and the new friend she'd made, and could she have a playdate with Sophia next week? I listened, responded, tried to be present, but part of me was elsewhere, calculating how many more days I could sustain this pace, wondering what would happen if I simply stopped. That evening, I made dinner as always. Grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, quinoa. Daniel and Veronica ate while scrolling through their phones, barely acknowledging the food or each other. The kids chattered, and I cleaned up, and the house hummed with the hollow rhythm of dysfunction masquerading as normal. After tucking Emma and Lucas into bed, reading them 2 stories each, checking for monsters under the bed, leaving nightlights on, I retreated to my garage apartment and collapsed on the bed fully clothed. Every muscle hurt. My hands shook slightly from exhaustion. This was unsustainable. I'd known it for a while, but tonight the knowledge crystallized into certainty. I couldn't keep doing this. The weekend brought no relief. Saturday morning, Veronica announced she and Daniel were going to Charlotte for the day, something about networking and potential investors. They left at 9 and returned at midnight, smelling of expensive wine and offering no explanation for their 11-hour absence. I spent the entire day with Emma and Lucas, taking them to the park, the library, making meals, mediating arguments, providing the stability and attention their parents couldn't be bothered to give. Sunday was Emma's 8th birthday party, a small gathering I'd organized because Veronica had forgotten until 3 days prior, then frantically delegated everything to me. Just keep it simple, she'd said. Maybe 12 kids, nothing fancy. Simple, as if planning a party for 12 children was ever simple. I'd baked a cake from scratch, chocolate with vanilla buttercream because Emma hated fondant. I'd decorated the backyard with streamers and balloons I'd bought with my own dwindling funds. I'd organized games and prepared goodie bags and coordinated with other parents about drop-off times and dietary restrictions. The party itself was chaos in the best way. Children running and shrieking and laughing, Emma's face glowing with joy, Lucas trying to keep up with the big kids. Veronica emerged from the house occasionally to take photos for Instagram, staging shots of Emma blowing out candles, carefully positioning herself in the frame while cropping me out. Daniel grilled hot dogs with grim determination, treating it like a chore rather than his daughter's birthday celebration. When it was over, when the last child had been picked up and the backyard was littered with paper plates and crushed cups and deflated balloon fragments, I started cleaning up alone. Daniel had disappeared back into his office. Veronica was on the phone, pacing the driveway and talking in her aggressive business voice about moving the needle and leveraging synergies. Emma found me gathering trash into a garbage bag. "Grandma, that was the best birthday ever. Thank you." "You're welcome, sweetheart. I'm so glad you had fun." She hugged me hard, her skinny arms wrapping around my waist. "I love you more than anybody." More than anybody. The words landed with a weight she couldn't have intended. More than her parents, she meant. More than the people who should have made this day special but had barely participated. I held her and tried not to cry and wondered what kind of damage was being done to these children. Growing up with parents who were physically present but emotionally absent, who treated family like an obligation rather than a gift. That night, alone in my garage apartment, I made a decision. I would talk to Daniel. Really talk to him. Not the surface-level exchanges we'd been having, but an actual conversation about boundaries and respect, and what this arrangement had become. I would tell him that I couldn't continue like this, that something had to change, that I needed acknowledgement at minimum and ideally some kind of plan for how this living situation would evolve. I rehearsed what I'd say, trying to find words that were honest but not accusatory, firm but not harsh. I wanted to give him a chance to step up, to remember who he used to be, to access whatever part of him still cared about me, as more than just free labor. But Monday morning came and Daniel left early for some unspecified errand. Tuesday, he was locked in his office all day. Wednesday, he wasn't home when I woke up and didn't return until after I'd gone to bed. He was avoiding me. Whether consciously or not, I couldn't say. Maybe he sensed my resolve and was preemptively escaping the confrontation. Or maybe he was just continuing the pattern of avoidance that had defined the past 5 years. Thursday evening, July 29th, I finally cornered him. He was in the kitchen making himself a sandwich with the ingredients I'd bought and prepared, and I planted myself between him and the door. "Daniel, we need to talk." He didn't look up from his sandwich construction. "Not a great time, Mom. I've got a call in 15 minutes. "You always have a call. You always have something more important. This can't wait anymore." Something in my tone must have registered because he finally met my eyes. "Okay, what's up? What's up?" As if I was about to ask him a casual question about weekend plans. I took a breath and forced myself to continue. "I need us to talk about this living arrangement. About what my role is here, about boundaries, about—" "Is this about money?" He interrupted. "Because things are really tight right now, Mom. The investor meeting didn't pan out, and this isn't about money, Daniel. It's about respect. It's about me feeling like a person instead of like—" I struggled for the right word. "Like staff. Like I exist only to serve your convenience." He looked genuinely confused, as if this perspective had never occurred to him. "You're not staff. You're family. We're grateful for everything you do. Grateful. When was the last time you said thank you? When was the last time you asked me how I was doing instead of just texting me orders? When was the last time you treated me like your mother instead of like hired help?" His face closed off, defensive walls slamming into place. "That's not fair. We're under a lot of pressure here. Veronica and I are trying to build something, and we need support. That's what family does. They support each other. Support flows both ways, Daniel. Or it should. But this." I gestured around the kitchen, encompassing the house, the life we'd built. "This is one way. I give everything. You take everything. And I'm not sure how much longer I can survive it." "What are you saying? Are you threatening to leave?" His voice rose, tinged with panic that wasn't about losing me, but about losing my labor, my childcare, my subsidization of their lives. "I'm saying something has to change. I'm saying I need you to see me, really see me, Daniel. I'm your mother. I sold my home for you. I gave you everything I had. And in return, I live in a garage and get treated like I'm invisible." For a moment, just a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Shame, maybe, or recognition. But then Veronica's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "What's going on here?" She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, surveying us with suspicion. "I could hear you all the way upstairs, Margaret. What's this about?" "This is between Daniel and me," I said quietly. "If it's happening in my house, it concerns me." She moved fully into the kitchen, positioning herself beside Daniel in a united front. "If you have complaints, let's hear them. But I'll warn you right now that we don't have time for drama. My house." She'd said my house, not our house. Not the house we bought with my money. My house. As if I was a tenant, a guest, someone with no claim to this space. The words I'd planned evaporated. Instead, I heard myself say, "I think I need to find somewhere else to live." The sentence hung in the air like smoke. Daniel's face went pale. Veronica's eyes narrowed. "You're leaving?" Daniel asked, and now the panic was real. "Mom, you can't just leave. What about the kids? What about me?" I asked softly. Does anyone ever ask that? Veronica made a sound of disgust. "This is emotional blackmail, classic manipulation. Poor me, no one appreciates me. You volunteered to help us, Margaret. No one forced you to sell your house. You made that choice." "You're right," I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. "I did make that choice, and now I'm making a different one." I walked out of the kitchen, out of the house, across the driveway to my garage apartment. I expected them to follow, to argue, to try to convince me to stay. But they didn't. I heard their voices through the walls. Daniel's anxious and Veronica's sharp, discussing the problem I'd just created. Discussing me like I was a logistical challenge rather than a human being. I sat on my bed in the darkness and shook with something that wasn't quite tears, more like a release of pressure that had been building for years. I'd said it out loud. I'd named the problem. I'd drawn a line, however wobbly and uncertain. Now I had to figure out what came next. The next day, Friday, July 30th, I called Sylvia and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, then said exactly what I needed to hear. "You can stay with me, however long you need. We'll figure out the rest later, but you need to get out of that house before it destroys you completely." The offer brought tears I'd been holding back for hours. "Sylvia, I can't impose on you like that." "It's not imposing. It's accepting help from someone who loves you, which is something you need to practice. Now start packing your things. Slowly, carefully. Don't announce you're leaving. Just gather what matters and be ready." Over the next 3 days, I quietly moved my essential belongings, clothing, important documents, photos, a few books, from the garage apartment to my car's trunk. I did it when Daniel and Veronica were out, when the house was empty. I felt like a criminal, sneaking around in a space where I should have been welcome, but I also felt the first stirrings of something I hadn't experienced in years: agency, choice, the sense that I was doing something for myself instead of for everyone else. Emma noticed my distraction. "Grandma, are you okay? You seem different." "I'm fine, sweetie. Just thinking about some things." "Are you going somewhere?" Children always knew. They picked up on the subtle shifts adults tried to hide. "Not right now," I said, which wasn't quite a lie. "But maybe someday." "If you go, can I come with you?" The question broke my heart. "Oh, Emma, you belong with your parents. But you take care of us. They're just here." I pulled her close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, and had no response that wouldn't hurt her more. She was right. That was the tragedy. She was absolutely right. By Monday, August 2nd, I was ready. I had a plan. I would leave early Tuesday morning before anyone woke up. I'd already written letters for Emma and Lucas, explaining as best I could without burdening them with adult pain. I'd written a longer letter for Daniel. Not angry, just honest. Telling him I loved him, but couldn't save him from himself. Telling him I hoped he'd find his way back to the person he used to be. Telling him this was goodbye until he could treat me like I mattered. I'd arranged with Sylvia to arrive Tuesday at 6 a.m. We'd load my things quickly and be gone before the household stirred. Clean break. No arguments. No last-minute guilt trips or manipulation. I spent Monday in a strange state of calm preparation. I made dinner as usual. Lasagna, garlic bread, salad. I played with Emma and Lucas. I cleaned the kitchen one last time. I moved through the house like a ghost, already half gone. That evening, after the kids were in bed, I stood in the backyard by my garden. The sunflowers had grown enormous, their heads heavy with seeds. The tomatoes were ripe and red. I'd planted this garden thinking I'd be here to harvest it, but someone else would eat these vegetables. Someone else would benefit from my labor, as always. I was picking a few ripe tomatoes, a goodbye harvest, when I heard raised voices from inside the house. Daniel and Veronica, arguing loudly enough that their words carried through the open windows. "Your fault we're in this mess. At least I'm trying, unlike you who just plays video games. Don't talk to me about trying. Your marketing business has literally 0 clients. And your furniture store made what? $73 in 6 months?" The same old argument. The same mutual recriminations. The same refusal to take real responsibility. I listened for a moment, feeling nothing but a distant sadness. This was what I was leaving. This dysfunction, this toxicity, this slow death of the spirit. I went to my garage apartment, my last night in this space that had never been home. I lay in the twin bed and watched the shadows on the ceiling and thought about tomorrow, about starting over at 68, about the uncertain future that was still better than this certain present. I almost made it out clean. But then Tuesday morning came, and everything changed in a way I couldn't have predicted, couldn't have prepared for, couldn't have imagined in my darkest nightmares. I was packing the last of my things into my car at 5:45 a.m., but moving silently in the pre-dawn darkness when the front door of the house burst open. Daniel and Veronica stood there, backlit by the hallway light, and for a confused moment, I thought they'd discovered my plan and were coming to stop me. But their faces weren't angry or hurt. They were alight with something else entirely, something wild and dangerous and euphoric. Veronica held something above her head, waving it like a flag. $5 million! She screamed into the quiet neighborhood morning. "We won $5 million! And that's when my careful exit plan disintegrated. When everything I'd been quietly arranging exploded into chaos. When the cruelty I'd been absorbing for 5 years finally crystallized into something so pure and undeniable that there would be no more excuses, no more rationalizations, no more pretending we were a family. That's when it all fell apart. Or maybe that's when it all came together. The truth finally visible, unavoidable, devastating. That's when I learned exactly how little I meant to them. And that's when I asked the question that would change everything. The lottery ticket was wrinkled, creased down the middle like it had been folded and unfolded many times. Even in the dim pre-dawn light, I could see that much as Veronica waved it frantically above her head. Her face twisted into an expression I'd never seen before. Pure, savage triumph mixed with something darker. Something that looked almost like hatred. 5 million! She shrieked again, her voice echoing off the neighboring houses. Somewhere a dog started barking. A porch light flickered on 2 houses down. $5 million. Daniel stood beside her, and the look on his face made my blood run cold. Not joy, exactly. Something more complicated. Relief and vindication and a wild kind of desperation, like a drowning man who'd just spotted land. His eyes found mine across the driveway, and I saw him register my car packed with boxes, the suitcase visible through the back window, the reality of what I'd been planning. But instead of concern or hurt or even surprise, what crossed his face was calculation. Cold, quick calculation. "Mom," he said, and his voice had an edge I'd never heard before, sharp enough to cut. "I guess your timing's pretty convenient, huh? About to sneak out, and now suddenly we don't need you anyway." The words landed like physical blows. I stood frozen by my car, one hand still on the trunk I'd been about to close, trying to process what was happening. They thought I was leaving because somehow I'd known about the lottery ticket? They thought I was opportunistic enough to abandon them in poverty, but shameless enough to cling to them in wealth? "Daniel, I don't understand what—" Veronica cut me off with a laugh that sounded like glass breaking. "Oh, this is perfect. This is absolutely perfect. 5 years of her martyr act, 5 years of her making us feel guilty, and the second we don't need her anymore, she's got her car packed and ready to go. At least now she can drop the pretense of actually caring about us." I looked at my son, really looked at him, and tried to find any trace of the boy I'd raised. The boy who'd brought me dandelions and called them flowers. The boy who'd held my hand during Richard's funeral and whispered, "I'll take care of you now, Mom." The boy who'd written me Mother's Day cards with crayon drawings and words so sweet they'd made me cry. That boy was gone, or buried so deep under resentment and failure and Veronica's poison that he might as well have been. "I'm leaving because I can't live like this anymore," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Because you treat me like I'm invisible. Because I've given everything and gotten nothing back. Because I'm 68 years old and I'm tired, Daniel. I'm so tired." "Oh, spare us the sob story," Veronica spat. She'd come down the porch steps now, moving closer, the lottery ticket clutched in her hand like a weapon. "You volunteered to help. You chose to sell your house. No one put a gun to your head. And now that we've finally caught a break, you want to make this about you? You want to make us feel bad for being happy?" The wrongness of it was so profound I couldn't find words. They were rewriting history in real time, reframing 5 years of exploitation as generosity I'd freely given, erasing every instance of cruelty and disrespect, making me the villain in a story where I'd been nothing but a victim of their selfishness. "Where's the ticket from?" I asked, focusing on something concrete because the emotional terrain was too treacherous. "What lottery? When was the drawing?" Veronica's eyes narrowed. "Why does that matter? It's a winning ticket. $5 million. Our life is about to change." "What drawing?" I repeated, my teacher voice emerging. The one I'd used with recalcitrant second graders who were trying to lie about homework. Firm, patient, unmovable. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Powerball. We bought it at the gas station on Patton Avenue a while back. Veronica's been keeping it in her wallet for safekeeping." "A while back when?" "Jesus Christ, Margaret, what's with the interrogation?" Veronica's voice climbed higher. "Are you trying to ruin this for us? Are you that bitter?" But I was watching Daniel's face, watching the way his eyes slid away from mine, watching the muscle in his jaw twitch the way it always did when he was lying. I'd seen that tell 1,000 times over the years. When he was 12 and claimed he hadn't eaten the last piece of cake. When he was 16 and swore he hadn't been drinking at Jason's party. When he was 32 and promised this new business venture would be different. "Daniel," I said softly, "when did you buy the ticket?" He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I'm not sure exactly. Last week? Maybe 2 weeks ago? Veronica shot him a look that could have stripped paint. Last month, she corrected quickly. We bought it last month. The drawing was... She trailed off, looking down at the ticket for the first time with something that might have been uncertainty. And there it was, the hairline crack in their certainty, the first whisper of doubt. I knew before she even checked the date. I could see it in the way her hand trembled slightly, in the way Daniel's face had gone from flushed to pale, in the way the pre-dawn air suddenly felt heavy with impending disaster. The drawing date is on the ticket, I said, keeping my voice calm, almost gentle. Have you checked if that draw isn't from last month? The question hung in the air like a bomb with the timer visible, counting down. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Veronica looked down at the ticket, really looked at it for the first time. Her lips moved as she read. The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. Daniel leaned over her shoulder, squinting at the small print in the dim light. No, he whispered. No, that can't be right. What? Veronica's voice cracked. What does it say? The drawing was July 7th, Daniel said, each word falling like a stone. That's almost a month ago. And the claim period. Jesus, V, the claim period for prizes over $10,000 is 30 days, and... Check the calendar, Veronica interrupted frantically, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. Check right now. How many days? How many days has it been? I watched them huddle over her phone, watched them count, watched reality crash down on them with devastating force. I already knew what they'd find. Today was August 3rd. The drawing was July 7th. 27 days. They still had time. Barely. But all their premature celebrating, all their cruelty, all their vicious dismissal of me had been based on an assumption they hadn't bothered to verify. 27 days, Daniel said hollowly. We still have 3 days to claim it. Relief flickered across Veronica's face, but it was short-lived because something else was dawning on her. Something worse than almost missing the deadline. She looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure, undiluted shame fighting with rage, losing, then fighting again. She'd just told me to go live in a shelter. They'd both screamed at me, told me they didn't need me anymore, revealed exactly what they thought of me, how little I meant to them, all based on a winning ticket they hadn't even properly verified. And I'd seen it all. I'd heard it all. There was no taking it back, no rewinding, no pretending it hadn't happened. The mask was off, and we all knew it. Mom, Daniel started, but I held up my hand. Don't. Just that one word, but it carried 5 years of pain, 5 years of swallowed anger, 5 years of steadily eroding dignity. Don't say whatever you're about to say. Don't apologize or explain or try to make this into something it isn't. It isn't what it looks like. He tried anyway, his voice desperate. We were just excited. We weren't thinking straight. You told me to go live in a shelter, Daniel. My voice was eerily calm, like I was narrating someone else's story. Your wife told me you didn't need me anymore. You both looked at me with contempt. Real, genuine contempt, and said things that can't be unsaid. And you did all of that before you'd even checked if the ticket was valid, before you'd done the bare minimum of due diligence, before you'd thought about anything except your own greed and relief at finally being rid of the burden of me. Veronica's face had gone from white to red, fury overtaking shame. You're going to hold this over our heads, aren't you? You're going to milk this for everything it's worth. Make us grovel. Make us pay for one moment of honesty? I finished for her. Because that's what it was, Veronica. Honesty. Maybe the most honest you've been with me in 5 years. You finally said out loud what you've been thinking all along. That I'm worthless to you. That I'm only tolerated because I'm useful. That the second you don't need me, you'd throw me away without a second thought. That's not fair, Daniel said weakly. Fair? The word came out sharp. You want to talk to me about fair? I sold my home for you. I gave you my life savings. I moved into a garage and cooked your meals and raised your children and cleaned your house and asked for nothing in return except basic human respect. And the moment you thought you had money you hadn't even verified, you couldn't wait to get rid of me. You couldn't wait to tell me exactly how little I mattered. A light came on in the house. Emma's small face appeared in her bedroom window, pressing against the glass, watching the scene unfold in the driveway. The sight of her snapped something in me. The awareness that these children were watching, learning, absorbing the lesson that this was how family treated each other. Go inside, I told Daniel and Veronica. Go verify your ticket properly. Figure out if you're actually rich or if this is just another one of your delusions. And either way, I'm leaving. Not because you're cruel, not to punish you, but because I finally understand that staying would kill me. Maybe not physically, but everything that matters about who I am. Staying would erase that completely. Mom, please. Daniel's voice broke. Don't do this. We need you. The kids need you. The kids need parents who are present and engaged. They need stability and love and attention. They need people who show up. And I can't provide that anymore because I have nothing left to give. You took it all, Daniel. You and Veronica bled me dry, and I let you because I loved you. But love isn't supposed to be this one-sided. Love isn't supposed to hurt this much. I turned back to my car, but Veronica's voice stopped me, high and sharp and dangerous. If you leave, you'll never see Emma and Lucas again. I'll make sure of that. You want to walk away? Fine. But you don't get to cherry pick what you walk away from. No more grandma visits, no more birthday parties. You're either family or you're not. The threat hung in the morning air. I turned back slowly, looking at her. Really looking at this woman who'd married my son and systematically poisoned what was left of our family. She was beautiful in a brittle way. All sharp edges and perfect surfaces, and completely hollow underneath. That's not your decision to make alone, I said quietly. Those children love me. And when they're old enough to understand what happened here, when they're old enough to ask questions about why Grandma disappeared, what are you going to tell them? That you threw me away when you thought you didn't need me anymore? That you told me to live in a shelter? That you kept them from me out of spite? Something flickered in Daniel's eyes. Awareness, maybe, or fear. He was starting to understand the position they'd put themselves in, the story that would follow them if I left under these circumstances. Don't use the kids as leverage, Veronica snapped. I'm not. You did that when you threatened to keep them from me. I'm just pointing out that actions have consequences. That cruelty leaves marks. That someday Emma and Lucas will ask what happened to their grandmother who loved them more than anyone else in the world, and you'll have to live with whatever answer you give them. I closed the trunk of my car. My hands were steady. Inside, I was screaming, breaking, shattering into 1,000 pieces. But outside, I was calm, resolved, finished. I'm going to stay with my friend Sylvia, I said. Here's her address. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. I'd written it down the night before and handed it to Daniel. When you want to bring Emma and Lucas to see me, you can. I'll be there. But I won't be here anymore. I won't watch you destroy each other. And I won't let you destroy me in the process. Mom! Daniel's voice was strangled. One more thing, I said. And my voice was steel now. Harder than I'd ever let it be. That ticket. Before you do anything else, before you claim it, before you start spending money you don't have yet, verify it. Actually, verify it. Because nothing would be more fitting than if this whole scene, all this cruelty and honesty and burned bridges, happened over a worthless piece of paper. At least then you'd know the true cost of showing me who you really are. I got in my car, started the engine, looked at my son one last time and tried to find something of Richard in his face, something of the family we used to be. But there was nothing familiar there anymore. Just a stranger who happened to share my DNA, who I'd loved more than life itself, who'd broken my heart so completely I wasn't sure it would ever be whole again. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Emma at the window, her small hand pressed against the glass. I waved to her, tried to smile, hoped she'd understand someday that leaving wasn't abandoning her. It was saving myself so I could be someone worth coming back to. The drive to Sylvia's house took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of crying so hard I could barely see the road. 20 minutes of grief so profound it felt physical, like my body was trying to expel something toxic. 20 minutes of freedom and terror and relief and heartbreak, all tangled together into something I couldn't name. Sylvia was waiting on her porch when I pulled up. She'd made coffee. She didn't ask questions or demand explanations. She just hugged me hard and long and said, "You're safe now. Whatever happened, you're safe now." I spent the rest of that Tuesday in a fog of exhaustion and grief. Sylvia's house was small but comfortable. A 2-bedroom bungalow in North Asheville with hardwood floors and lots of natural light, and the kind of lived-in warmth that comes from a space being genuinely loved. She'd prepared the guest room for me, fresh sheets and flowers on the nightstand, and a stack of books on the dresser in case I couldn't sleep. "Stay as long as you need," she told me. Months, years, whatever. We'll figure out the details later. Right now, just rest. But I couldn't rest. My mind kept circling back to that moment in the driveway, to the looks on their faces, to the words that could never be unspoken. I kept reaching for my phone to check on the kids, then remembering I'd left that life behind. They weren't my responsibility anymore. They were their parents' responsibility, and their parents would have to step up or let them down. But either way, it wasn't on me. Around noon, my phone rang. Daniel. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Mom. His voice was rough, like he'd been crying. Mom, we need to talk. About what? The ticket. We went to claim it this morning. The lottery office downtown. We went as soon as they opened. I waited, saying nothing. It's real, Mom. It's a real winning ticket. $5 million before taxes. $3.2 million after. It's real. Something in my chest loosened, then tightened again. So it wasn't a cruel joke. They really were about to be wealthy. They really had told me to live in a shelter on the threshold of wealth that would change their lives forever. Congratulations, I said, and meant it. Not for them, but for Emma and Lucas, who'd finally have parents who weren't drowning in stress and failure. Please come home, Daniel said, and he was definitely crying now. Please, Mom. I'm sorry. We're sorry. We were horrible. I know we were horrible. But please don't do this. Please don't leave like this. You told me you didn't need me anymore, I said quietly. You meant it. I saw it on your face. And you know what? You're right. You don't need me. You never needed me. You needed my money and my labor and my willingness to absorb your dysfunction. But you don't need me. And I don't need this. The kids need you. The kids need their parents. And now you can afford to give them everything they need. Hire a nanny if you don't want to do the actual parenting. Send them to the best schools. Give them stability and opportunity. You don't need me for any of that. I need my mom, he whispered. I need you to tell me I'm not the person I was this morning. I need you to tell me I can fix this. The plea in his voice almost broke me. Almost. But then I remembered his face when he thought he was rich, the calculation in his eyes, the relief at being able to discard me without guilt. I remembered 5 years of invisibility and disrespect. I remembered Veronica's contempt and his complicity in it. Daniel, I love you. I will always love you because you're my son. But love isn't enough. It's never enough when there's no respect, no reciprocity, no genuine care. You can't fix this with words. You can't apologize your way out of what you revealed this morning. You showed me who you really are, and I believe you. Please. I'm at Sylvia's house. The address is on the paper I gave you. When you want to bring Emma and Lucas to visit, call first. Set up a time. I'll be here. But I won't be coming back to that house. I can't. I'm done, Daniel. I'm finally done. I hung up before he could respond, before his grief could weaken my resolve. Then I turned off my phone completely and let myself collapse into the grief I'd been holding back. Sylvia found me on the guest room floor an hour later, sobbing into the carpet. She sat down beside me and didn't try to fix it or minimize it or tell me it would be okay. She just sat with me in it, her hand on my back, present and solid and real. I raised him better than this, I said when I could finally speak. Richard and I, we taught him about kindness and loyalty and treating people with dignity. How did he become this person? People become who they choose to become, Sylvia said gently. You gave him every tool to be a good man. He chose to put those tools down. That's not your failure, Margaret. That's his. The days that followed were strange and untethered. I existed in a liminal space, not quite grieving because Daniel wasn't dead, but mourning all the same. Mourning the relationship we'd had, the son I'd thought he was, the family I'd believed we could be. Wednesday passed in a haze. Thursday I helped Sylvia in her garden and tried not to think about my own garden, about the tomatoes ripening without me, about whether Emma was eating enough vegetables or Lucas was sleeping through the night. Friday, Sylvia convinced me to go with her to her banjo class, and I sat in the back of the room listening to a group of enthusiastic amateurs murder Foggy Mountain Breakdown, and felt the first stirrings of something that wasn't quite peace but wasn't despair either. Daniel called 17 times over those 3 days. I didn't answer. Veronica called twice, both times from numbers I didn't recognize so I'd pick up. The first time I heard her voice, I hung up immediately. The second time I listened long enough to hear her say, "You're being incredibly selfish and childish, and when you finally grow up and realize what you've thrown away, before disconnecting. Saturday morning, Sylvia and I were having coffee on her porch when a car pulled up. My heart jumped, expecting Daniel. But it was Jennifer, the mother from Lucas's playdate, the one who'd looked at me with pity. She got out of the car carrying a covered dish and looking nervous. "Mrs. Holloway? I hope you don't mind me tracking you down. Daniel gave me this address. He said you were staying with a friend." "I am," I said carefully. "Is everything okay? Are the kids?" "The kids are fine. I mean, as fine as they can be given." She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. "I made you some food. I know that sounds ridiculous. Like food can fix anything. But I didn't know what else to do. And I wanted you to know that some of us saw what was happening. Some of us knew it wasn't right, the way they treated you." The kindness caught me off guard. "Thank you. That's very thoughtful." She set the dish down on the porch railing, but didn't leave. Instead, she took a breath and said, "I need to tell you something. Last Tuesday, Emma came to our house for a playdate we'd scheduled. She was really upset. She told my daughter that you'd left, that her parents had made you leave, that she heard them screaming mean things at you in the driveway." Pain lanced through my chest. Emma had heard. Of course she'd heard. Children always heard the things adults tried to hide. "She asked me if grandmas could stop loving their grandkids," Jennifer continued, her voice thick with emotion. "She asked if you left because you didn't want to see her anymore. And I told her. I hope this was okay. I told her that you loved her very much, that grown-ups sometimes have complicated problems, and that none of it was her fault. But Margaret, that little girl is heartbroken. She thinks she did something wrong." I was crying before I realized it, tears streaming down my face. "I need to see her. I need to explain." I told Daniel that. I told him he needs to bring those kids to see you, that whatever happened between adults, the children shouldn't be punished for it. He said Veronica won't allow it. "She's furious with you for leaving, furious that you're making them look bad. And she's refusing to let the kids have contact until you apologize and come back. The manipulation was so obvious, so cruel, so predictable. Use the children as weapons. Make me choose between my boundaries and my grandchildren. Force me back into submission through emotional blackmail. She can't keep them from me forever," I said. But it sounded weak even to my own ears. "No," Jennifer agreed. "But she can make it very difficult. And in the meantime, those kids are suffering. Emma barely ate anything at our house. She just sat on the couch hugging her knees and asking when she could see you." After Jennifer left, I sat on Sylvia's porch and tried to think through the impossible choice I was facing. Go back and lose myself completely, or stay away and lose my grandchildren. There had to be a third option. There had to be a way to protect myself while still being present for Emma and Lucas. "You could talk to a lawyer," Sylvia suggested. "Grandparents have rights in North Carolina. Not many, but some. If you can prove the kids have a significant relationship with you, that would destroy any chance of reconciliation with Daniel," I said. "It would turn this into a legal battle, make everything worse. Maybe worse is what's needed. Maybe Daniel needs to face consequences. Maybe Veronica needs to learn she can't manipulate people without repercussions." I thought about it all weekend. By Sunday evening, I'd made a decision. I would write letters to Emma and Lucas, simple letters they could understand, explaining that I loved them, that I'd never stopped loving them, that grown-ups sometimes needed space to work through big feelings, but that didn't change how much grandmas loved their grandchildren. I'd give the letters to Jennifer to pass along, circumventing Veronica's blockade. And I'd wait. I'd give Daniel time to understand the gravity of what he'd done, time to grow a spine and stand up to his wife, time to choose between enabling Veronica's cruelty or doing what was right for his children. If he chose wrong, if he chose Veronica's manipulation over his children's well-being, then I'd know exactly who he'd become, and I'd grieve that loss fully and finally. Monday morning, I sat at Sylvia's kitchen table and wrote to my grandchildren, "Dear Emma, I love you bigger than the sky and deeper than the ocean. I want you to know that me living at Miss Sylvia's house has nothing to do with you or Lucas. Sometimes grown-ups need to make changes in their lives, and that's what's happening with Grandma right now. I miss you every single day. I miss our stories and our talks and the way you explain things that you're learning. I miss your laugh and your questions and your bright, brilliant mind. I'm always here if you need me. Your parents have Miss Sylvia's address, and when you're older, I'll explain everything in a way that makes sense. For now, I just need you to know, you did nothing wrong. This isn't your fault. And my love for you hasn't changed even a tiny bit. You are brave and smart and kind, and I'm so proud to be your grandma. Love bigger than the universe, Grandma Margaret. I wrote a similar letter to Lucas, simpler and shorter because he was only 4 and couldn't read yet, but Emma could read it to him. Then I sealed them in envelopes and drove to Jennifer's house. "Thank you for doing this," I told her as I handed over the letters. "I know it's asking a lot." "It's not asking anything," she interrupted. "It's the least I can do. Those kids deserve to hear from you. And between you and me, I think Daniel is miserable. He knows he screwed up. He just doesn't know how to fix it, and Veronica won't let him try." The letters bought me some measure of peace. At least Emma and Lucas would know I hadn't abandoned them. At least they'd have something tangible, something they could hold on to. But it didn't solve the fundamental problem. My son had revealed himself to be someone I barely recognized, someone who'd let his wife poison what was left of our family, someone who'd chosen his own comfort over his children's emotional well-being. And I didn't know if that person could be redeemed, or if I even wanted to be part of the story if redemption came too late, cost too much, or was built on more false promises and temporary shame instead of genuine transformation. Tuesday, August 10th, exactly 1 week after I'd left, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, expecting another of Veronica's attempts to reach me from borrowed phones. But something made me pick up. "Mrs. Holloway?" An unfamiliar male voice, professional and careful. "My name is Marcus Webb. I'm a family therapist here in Asheville. Your son Daniel and his wife Veronica are in my office right now, and they'd like to speak with you, with me present as a mediator. Would you be willing to come in for a session?" I sat down hard, my legs suddenly weak. They're in therapy? They've attended 2 sessions so far, individually and as a couple. "Daniel specifically asked me to reach out to you about family therapy. He says there are things that need to be addressed, bridges that need to be rebuilt. I can't speak to the specifics over the phone, but I can tell you that both parties seem genuinely interested in repair work." Genuinely interested. The words felt slippery, unreliable. How did you measure genuine interest? How did you distinguish between real remorse and performative guilt? "I'll think about it," I said. "Take all the time you need. My number will be in your call history. When and if you're ready, reach out. There's no pressure, no expectation. But I want you to know that the door is open if you want to walk through it." After he hung up, I sat with Sylvia and tried to sort through my feelings. Part of me wanted to believe this was real, that Daniel had finally woken up, that he was doing the work, that change was possible. But another part, the part that had been hurt too many times, the part that had learned to protect itself, whispered warnings about false hope and repeating patterns. "What do you want?" Sylvia asked. "Not what's best for Daniel or what Emma and Lucas need, or what makes you look like a good person. What do you actually want?" I thought about it for a long time. I want to know if he can really change. I want to see if the person he was this morning, that cruel, calculating person, is who he's become, or if it was just a moment of weakness that he's genuinely horrified by. I want to know if there's anything left of the son I raised, or if that person is gone forever. "Then go to the therapy session," Sylvia said. "Go and listen. You don't have to forgive anything. You don't have to make any decisions. Just go and gather information. See what they have to say when there's a professional in the room holding them accountable." So, on Friday, August 13th, 13 days after I'd left, I walked into Marcus Webb's office and sat across from my son and daughter-in-law for the first time since that terrible morning. They looked different. Daniel had lost weight, his face gaunt and shadowed with exhaustion. Veronica's perfection had slipped. Her hair less polished, her clothes more casual, something in her eyes that might have been shame or might have been anger at being forced into this situation. Marcus was a black man in his 50s with kind eyes and an air of quiet authority. He thanked me for coming, established some ground rules. No interrupting, no name-calling, no walking out without explaining why, and then turned to Daniel. "Daniel, why don't you start? Tell your mother what brought you here." Daniel's hands were shaking. He clasped them together and looked at me with eyes that were red-rimmed and desperate. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. Not just what happened that morning, but the whole 5 years. The way we treated you, the way I let Veronica treat you, the way I stopped seeing you as my mom and started seeing you as free labor, as someone who existed to make our lives easier. I'm sorry." The words hung in the air. I wanted to believe them. God, how I wanted to believe them. But words were easy. Words cost nothing. Why did it take losing me to recognize that? I asked. Why couldn't you see it while I was there? Because I was drowning, he said, his voice breaking. We were drowning. Every business failed. Every plan fell apart. And I felt like such a failure. As a husband, as a father, as a provider. And you were there, solid and stable and handling everything. And it was easier to just let you handle it than to face my own inadequacy. It was easier to resent you for being capable than to admit I wasn't. Veronica shifted in her seat but said nothing. Marcus's attention turned to her. Veronica, what about you? What brought you here? She was quiet for a long moment, her jaw working like she was chewing something tough. Finally, she said, I grew up in foster care. 7 different families between ages 6 and 18. I learned early that you don't trust anyone to take care of you. You take care of yourself. And when Margaret moved in, when she was always there, always capable, always. Better at being a mother to my kids than I was. I hated her for it. I hated that she made me feel inadequate. I hated that Emma and Lucas ran to her instead of me. And I took that hate and wrapped it up in contempt and cruelty because it was easier than admitting I was jealous of my own children's grandmother. The confession was raw, more honest than I'd expected. It didn't excuse anything, but it explained some of it. The particular venom in her words, the way she'd systematically tried to diminish me. I'm not good at this, Veronica continued, gesturing vaguely at the room, at the therapy, at vulnerability itself. I'm not good at admitting I'm wrong or asking for help or any of it. But Marcus has been helping me understand that the way I grew up, the way I learned to survive, doesn't work for building a family. And I'm trying. I'm really trying to be different. Marcus turned to me. Margaret, what do you need from them? Not what you want them to say or do to make this right. What do you need to even consider repairing this relationship? I'd thought about this question all week. I need to know this isn't just damage control. I need to know you're not in therapy because it looks good or because you feel guilty, but because you genuinely want to change. I need to see sustained effort over time, not just apologies and promises. And I took a breath, forcing myself to say the hard thing. I need space from both of you while I figure out who I am without being your solution to every problem. What about Emma and Lucas? Daniel asked desperately. They're asking about you constantly. Emma cries herself to sleep. Lucas keeps setting an extra place at dinner for you. Please, Mom, they need to see you. I wrote them letters, I said. I told them I love them and that none of this is their fault. But Veronica, you threatened to keep them from me. You said if I left, I'd never see them again. So before we talk about visitation, I need to, after 5 years of supporting them, my son and his wife screamed with the $5 million winning ticket in hand. We don't need you anymore. Go live in a shelter. And I, Serene, only asked, have you checked if that draw isn't from last month?